Yeah, so we're still following from last week. We were discussing about HATMANA. The discussion on HATMANA was putting it in a silver foil. Is that considered mutman or that's considered as pat? We know that putting it in a pat, putting food in a pat is not called HATMANA, even though it's surrounded around, it's not considered HATMANA. So the question was silver foil. So I don't want to start with that. I would rather end with that because I would like to finish and not get stuck in the middle of the discussion with crackpots as much as you heard about it. I think there has to be a few akdamas and then we'll be able to pass on ourselves, on our own. So it's important to get the akdamas of what is a machlokes, and before the machlokes to get the aside of what HATMANA b'miktzas is and HATMANA b'kulai. The Gemara mentions in two places about the musig of HATMANA b'miktzas. There's a Gemara Mem Zayin Amud Beis. The Gemara says Kupa shetomem ba asel anicha gabe gefesh al zeisim. And the Rishonim are being done. Is it talking about a place where the kupa is munach without any hefsek avi or not? But that's where the Ikar Rishonim are based to understand this din of HATMANA b'miktzas. Now, the Ritva on Mem Zayin Amud Beis says, Hadava yedua shloi asru kedeya zu sheinicha gabe gefes elo mipnei shu tmuna b'kupa avalam hoisa megula ba'alma sharia. If it's just covered, it's okay. That means, calls man, it's not megula completely, there's no problem. The Chedusha Aran on the Flamet Chesam and Aleph says it's just the same. And the Beis Yosef brings this, that this is also the Shittas HaZerua, Shulchan Aruch brings the Shittas Ben Yaina, that HATMANA b'miktzas is not considered HATMANA. Who says it is? The Rashba Mem Zayin Amud Beis, the Ramaschal Kupa, the Rashba says, Al Kochach, Afilu b'she'einu negas al gabe gefes mamish. Because if it's negas, even if it's not Tomam Bekula, it's awesome. So therefore, you have machlekes in the Rishonim. We're not going to go elaborate. There's many Rishonim. The Beis Yosef is Mayach on it, and we're not going to go explain that. What we want to know is what the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah bring for us to the table. The Shulchan Aruch in Reish Nun Gimel, the end of Sif Aleph, says as follows: Kol ze be'inyan Shia, she'agdeira yosheves al kisei shel Basil oyal gabe avonim ve'ena noigas b'gecholim. Aval HATMANA al gabe gecholim l'divrei hakol osem. HATMANA put on top of coals, a pot put on coals is awesome. So it's very clear. He's talking about HATMANA b'miktzas, and the Shulchan Aruch is telling us that is awesome. That is Shulchan Aruch in Reish Nun Gimel, the end of Sif Aleph. So Shulchan Aruch paskins HATMANA b'miktzas is a problem. The Ramah says the Yesh Aimim da afilim agdeira oimedes agabe eish mamish calls manchi megula l'mayla lo'mikri HATMANA v'shari v'chein haminik. It's right there, 3 lines from the bottom of the page. The Ramah says the Yesh Aimim da afilim agdeira oimedes agabe eish mamish calls manchi megula l'mayla lo'mikri HATMANA v'shari v'chein haminik.
So Mordechai, yeah.
Yeah. So now, Zok the Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim is in Siman Reish Nun Tes, Mishbitz Zav, Sifkat and Gimel. He quotes, he brings the Ramah. He says again, the Mechaber says that it's awesome. The Ramah says, Yesh Aimim, that it's mutter since it's only HATMANA b'miktzas, v'chein haminik. So what is the Ramah paskening when he's writing v'chein haminik? Zok the Pri Megadim. Im agdeya megula l'mayla haminig lahakol ki b'simin reish nun gimel sif aleph. Ha me'ikr adin yesh lahachman. And like I'll explain in the end of the simin of Kitzadina Shia HATMANA. Very interesting. The Ramah at the end of the simonim of Shia Chazar and HATMANA starts with simin reish nun gimel. So at the end of them, he goes and he has a kitzah called Dinei Shia HATMANA b'kitzah. And over there he writes as follows: HATMANA b'Mosef Hevel Tzorch she's yachash shloisha tanar. Aleph. Kol hakdeya mechusa. The whole thing has to be covered. K'moshe kasaba Ramah, HaRav, which is the Ramah, simulation of Gimel Sif Aleph, the Loike Mechabesha. So over here, the Pri Megadim writes very clearly that the Ramah holds HATMANA b'miktas is not HATMANA. No problem. Now again, the Pri Megadim in Rishon and Tes Mishbetzos Zav Sifkat and Gimel brings the Ramah that really make out then you should be machmir, even though the Ramah wrote B'chein Aminig Lahakal, but he says Meikad then you should be machmir. The Pri Megadim at the end of the Siman, when he writes the Kitzah Halachas, he says like the Ramah HATMANA b'miktas lo yishma HATMANA. Now what's going on over here? So there's a very interesting Chuvas Ramah in Siman Lamed Hey. He says as follows. You don't have that in the papers, so I'll quote it. V'chein kasafti ba'atzmi b'chiburi Darkei Moshe. The Ramah wrote Darkei Moshe. We all know that the Ramah really wrote his whole Shulchan Aruch for us Ashkenazim. But once the Beis Yosef came out with a Shulchan Aruch, he said, why be matriach? Why go ahead and write a whole Shulchan Aruch? Let me just be magia on the Shulchan Aruch. But before that, he had a sefer called Darkei Moshe. So this sefer Darkei Moshe was printed before he wrote the Ramah. So he writes as follows. In Chuvas Ramah, he writes, I wrote in the Chiva Darkei Moshe, Asher Mimeni Sadati Shulchan Aruch, where I was Masada the Shulchan Aruch, V'chein Dikdakti, I was medaktik, Machekasafti V'am Nog. Sometimes I write V'am Nog. But like Kasafti Stam V'chein Noyag. K'moishu Midaki B'shai Mekaymis. Upuk Chazim Ma'amad Dabar. What do people do? Which means like this. The Ramah is being made on himself. That when I write V'am Nagu, it doesn't mean that that's really what you should be doing. I'm not so bar, but that's what people are doing. But when I write V'chei Noyagin, that is the Shura Sadin, that's what should be done. So the truth, we don't have to look for Klalim. The Chuvas Ramah writes this about himself. He says, when I'm writing V'am Nagu, you should realize that I'm not clear. I'm a supik what to do. The develops like this, Meikadin, you should be machmir. But when I'm writing V'chei Noyagin, that's what you should be doing. That is La Halacha. So now, let's go back to the Ramah. Oh, wow. Okay, it's Siman Lamed Hey, not Siman Lamed Tes. But I don't know if we have to. If you want, we can see it.
What do you need?
V'chein kasafti, right here, 4 lines on the bottom. What you brought. V'chein kasafti ba'atzmi b'chiburi Darkei Moshe. Asher mimeni sadati ha'shulchan aruch. That's where I started writing the Shulchan Aruch. V'chein dikdakti v'mashek kasafti v'am nagu shaloi levarach v'le kasafti stam v'chein noyagin k'moshu midaki b'shak k'kaimis v'puk chazim ma'amadava v'chein nili mekamatayim. And then he's going on a certain tshuva over there, and he goes to explain why he really feels not as so. Which means, v'am nagu is telling you what people do. And maybe there's many reasons why not to do it. But when I write v'chein noyagin, then you should know that that's what I pass. So the Ramah writes this about himself. What does he write now? Going back to our Ramah. What does he write in our Ramah? He doesn't say none of the two. He says a third lashon. V'chein haminik. What does that mean? Is that like v'am nagu, or that's v'chein haminik? What? I spoke about this a few weeks ago, right? It's good, yeah, very good. I spoke about this a few weeks ago, and it was Negeya Shia. We're talking about Shia. If we pass on the Hanani, if you remember, that was the beginning of his man. Very good.
More than a few weeks ago, a few months ago. Yeah, very good. Okay, Rabbi Stern saying good. Yeah. So therefore, when it says V'chein minig, it's similar to V'chein noyagin, but maybe it's also V'am nagu. So we don't have clarity exactly what the Ramah would tell the Bnei Ashkenaz. Now, the Pri Megadim has a klalim in the beginning of Yeridea. He has klalim. It's called Hayras Isavahata. It's brought down in many Shulchan Aruchs. Pri Megadim in the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch of Yeridea, he has a sefer called Hayras Isavahata. And over there in Ois Zayin, he writes as follows: V'tir HaRav Zal. HaRav is always the Ramah. What's Beis Yosef called? Maran. Right? And the Ramah is always called HaRav. So when the Pri Megadim is writing HaRav, he's calling the Ramah.
he says the Rav writes Kaisav lePa'amim v'Hachi Nog, Mashma Shuzar Kaisav Linikain Mikam be'Elach. Ubemokim shekaisav v'chein haminig or v'chein ne'egin gam ken yesh chilik. The lePa'amim haminig rak bekruka or ba'isei glil. LePa'amim b'chal Medina. Very interesting. The Pri Megadim is telling you not like we just saw in the Ramah. You know what's going on here? We saw in the Chuvas Ramah. He tells us what he meant. Pri Megadim, I guess, didn't have the Chuvas Ramah, and he says that Faket, when he writes V'Hachi Nog, that he's trying to tell you Mikam ve'Elach v'chein haminig or v'chein ne'egin yesh pa'amim haminig rak bekruka or lePa'amim b'chal Medina. So he's not being machriya exactly over here, and that's why we see that Pri Megadim over here in one place in Reish Testament of Sivkat and Gimel, he says to be machmeh, and the Klalim and the Dinim, he says maybe it can be mekel. So that's why we see that this word is a bit confusing, and that's why it's going to be debatable what the Ramah really held. Now, the Magen Avraham in Reish and Zayin Sivkat and Yitches says, "Like the Ramah, afil noigim v'chalam shai kimet she'ena tamim b'gadim." Since it's not tamim b'kulai, the Ramah holds its mutter. The Mishabura and Reish and Zayin Sivkat and Memei.
Ramah might take the lashon of the Mordechai. He actually brings his lashon. So how could you say that the Ramah didn't paskin that way?
Okay, so when there's a mechaber Ramah, when the Ramah brings a machlekes Rishonim, we don't know that's how we paskin. He's telling you that the mechaber said it's awesome. The Ramah is telling you, I know some Rishonim that hold its mutter. What are we paskin? Okay, v'chein noegin, v'chein haminig, v'hachi nog. That's what's different Rishonis. If he went out of his way to be Meiseh v'chein noegin, which means that I'm not being, it's not, let me just not bring the Mordechai as himself, let me see what else should we do with that. So since he put extra words at the end, normally the Ramah just argues, and that's it. The Yesh Shaimim or the Yesh Chalkim, whatever. Then he puts in a few words, so we have to see what his klal is when he writes those words. Does he mean to pass like that? It just means that there is such a shita, and you could be mekel. About we agree the Ramah holds you could be mekel. The shayla is what meikar din should a person in Yesh Shamayim should he be machmir. So the Mishabura in two places. Reish and Zayin Sivkat and Memhei, he brings the Ramah for Pashtis, HATMANA b'miktas, loy chashav HATMANA. Also, early on, in Reish and Gimel, Sivkat and Samach Tes, loy mikri HATMANA, k'may shekasav Ramah. So the Mishabura, our Chavetz Chaim, had no problem understanding the Ramah, that is the halacha HATMANA b'miktas, loy shma HATMANA. You're in Reish and Gimel or you're in Reish?
He's more in Reish Zayin now.
He's in Reish and Zayin. So Reish and Zayin, it's Sivkat and Memhei. So over there, he brings down for a Masham, second line over there. Masham Agas Svirle, Daidei Zel, Loy Chashav HATMANA, because it's HATMANA b'miktas, so it's Paskin's Pashat, no Chumris, no nothing. The Ramah holds its mutter. And so too, like I told you, in Reish and Gimel, Sivkat and Samach Tes, he says very clearly, no problem.
So shtickle ambiguous lashon. He cites the mechaber and Ramah. He doesn't say for sure. I mean, I guess it's Pashat, right? Like Ramah, we go with the Ramah.
Right, no, but right, true. But I'm saying, I'm trying to learn up how we understand the Ramah itself. The Ramah Svir,
how we understand the
Ramah. Once we have the Ramah, we've been Ashkenaz, we do the Ramah. It's not a problem.
Pashat, yeah.
Now, the Chazon Ish argued on this very strongly, and he says, "Utamur ma'oid she'en lezazech," and he has a whole arichas which we're not going to go into, and the Mistapel also goes with this in Orchos Rabbeinu, that you should be machmeh with shitas hamechaber. And the Bris Olam, which is, again, we said that was like the first sefer brought down the Kitzah Hilchos Shabbos before the Shmir Shabbos even came out. Rabbi Yamin Zilber, it was called Rabbi Yamin HaTzadik. He wrote a sefer called Bris Olam. And from that, we said, with his many tshuvas from today called Az Nidbru, which was based off that people would attack him when he came out with that Sefer Hilchos Shabbos, and that's when he started as Az Nidbru, and that started basically on Rav Hilchos Shabbos. Then people started asking Shabbos, and there's come out 20 Chalakim today. Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet Chalakim, more of Chalakim Az Nidbru, that came off this thing. So in Bris Olam he writes, Ulamaisi yesh ta'achmik ha'zanish, the pasuk Rav HaPoskim the HATMANA b'miktas shma HATMANA. The cost of the Afilirak Akis Levan, HATMANA b'miktas shma HATMANA. And they went out at him, and the Chelik Aleph, Simon Mem Zayin, Eis Dalet, he says, L'maisa Kasach Chazanish L'achmik Rav HaPoskim. I'm a Talmud Chazanish. I'm telling you what Chazanish held, to be machmeh. V'kvar Akdimu b'Sefer Shvius Shabbos. There's a very chashuv sefer that looks like the Iglei Tal,
came out a lot after that. Shvisa Shabbos was a Yid before pre-war, and he writes over there. So beside him says, "What are you attacking me for? I'm just quoting the Chazon Ish. I'm saying over the Shvisa Shabbos, so you should be machmer." Chelik Gimel Siman Tezvav Beis Aleph again. He says to be machmer, and then in Chelik Chesim in your test, he started taking a back seat a little bit. I guess he got that. Chelik Aleph, Chelik Gimel, Chelik Ches. Lo yisik av anatziv v'Yisraelam. When I brought the Chazon Ish, Shem Meichel and Mishaysim Mehepech, Avada, you can be Meichel on the Ramah. So,
how usual is this that you have a clear psak of the Ramah that all of a sudden we start counting Rishonim and say now we're passing like the Mechaber? We're Bnei Ashkenaz. How is this unusual? Isn't this unusual?
Yes, this is unusual, and that's exactly why Reb Shlomo I gave this Akdama, that the Ramah, when he wrote V'chein Nayigin, so you see that he was a little bit naita to the Mechaber's day. He was already being naita somewhat to Mechaber for us, and he said, you know what, the Mechaber's day is really the Ikadin, just Bnei Ashkenaz and Krukah and Glil, they were, maybe they were Menatzim, maybe not, I have no idea, and they weren't Naig, they took the Kula. So that's how people are doing, but so that's what the Chazon Ish got his foot in there to say, you know what, we want to go ahead and stop being Machmer. And the Chazon Ish goes a minion with the Rishonim.
And that's before the Sefer Yosher, even.
Right. We'll get to that. Right, very good. Yeah. So now, so this is where we have to start talking about crackpots, is because we have to know Bechlal, the Yesod Adava is, why in the world should we stop being Machman at one mixes? We'll get to it, some mixes not. Like upon him, this is where this starts the nicer. Now, in HATMANA Bekulai, the Mechaber that says that you don't need HATMANA Bekulai, but let's say like the Ramah, let's say the Match, like upon him, we have a Shainim that say that you mean HATMANA Bekulai. What's considered HATMANA Bekulai? So the Bima Godim has a discussion about this, and he says that if it's covered on top, it's already considered HATMANA Bekulai. Now, the Bima Godim's relation on Tess, Mishbet Zayzav, Sivkot and Gimel. We're not going to be married on this, but one thing we do know, and Reb Shlomo said, I see the Olam does know this, the sheet is a Benatam. The Benatam says, Chamin shalonu she'anu toimnin, afal pi, sheyesh svivoisav ma'at remetz kegoiva etzba ein kanissa, the HATMANA mashma she'mechusa barubai.
Sefer Yosher.
Sefer Yosher, Simon Reish Lamed Hey. So now, this is where it's going to make us a lot of problems with the crackpot. Because the Sefer Yosher to a Benatam. That was a Benatam Sak Sefer. Benatam Bali Tosfos. And he writes over there that Rubai is also considered HATMANA Bekulai. We know in Kolatay Kula, Rubai Kekulai. Smell Rubai is considered HATMANA Bekulai. So if so, that Sefer Yosher is paskening for us that even though you go with the Ramah, Sefer Yosher before Ramah, let's say with the March with all those Shitas, that you're pasking. This is Shulchan HaRav.
No, it's he's getting to it.
Okay.
It's under fire.
So we say over there that it's a problem of Kulai, only Kulai, Zok to Sefer Yosher Benatam, who adin, if it's just Rubai, it's also a problem. Oh, got it.
It's line 7 or 8. Where is it?
Further down. No, that's not it. That right there, it's like 2 lines from where the bottom we could see. Yeah. Is it HATMANA or higher? A line higher?
No, you went too far. Line right. Cham and Shalanu.
Yeah, the Cham and Shalanu before the period, right after the period.
Go up 2 lines.
Yeah. Shanu Taimnin. Afa Pishe Svivaisa Ma'at Remetz Kigoiva Etzba Enkan Isse the HATMANA Mashma Shemachusa Ba Rubai Oikula. So here you go. That the Benatam is telling you, even though Kulai, but Kulai doesn't mean Kulai. Kulai Rive is enough. So this is where, so now we have to know, do we pass like this a Benatam or not? Chayodam, in Klal Chaf Aleph Sivchav Beis, writes that you put coffee in sand. Ro Lasses came, Sheyatmin Akliyam Akava B'choil, Uvavat Shlo Yatmin Kulai, Sorry, it's chazvutik. Don't go ahead and be matmin. Only chetzioy ishlishisay. Mashma more than chetzioy is a problem. Now we all know the Chayadim was Ashkenaz, right?
No, Rav Pesach, don't make cross references here. No. I'm getting weiter.
Okay.
Yeah, Chayyim was
Okay,
as Ashkenaz as you can get.
Right. Chayyim was Ashkenaz. And the Chayyim is telling us what's called Hatmana Bekulai. Calls man, it's more than half. So the Chayyim, I know this yichus about this, don't worry, it's good to mention that.
Yeah.
I know I'm not sure why it's here. But that's why but the Maisa we have here, the Chayyim. Chayyim tells us very clearly that even calls man, it's more than machtis, it's a problem. The Chayyim knew the Ramah, and the Chayyim's understanding this is considered kulai. So obviously the Chayyim understood, like the Sefer Yasha, that Chayyim is Klal Chaf Aleph Sif Chav Beis. I don't know if you have it.
We have it. We have 3 Chayyadim. Klal Chaf Aleph Sif Chav Beis. Okay, we're waiting 1 second until we can show the Ilam.
Okay.
No, this is the other one. There's 2 Chayyadim.
Yeah.
Okay, the Rav should go weiter and we'll look.
Okay. So there's a steer in the Chayyim. This is one Chayyim, and the next Chayyim is in Klal Chav, in Klal Beis, what he was going to bring up. Sif Hey, he says very clearly, Ella begufak de ubechol tzedada. Says mashma that you need the whole entire thing. Okay. So now, let's go. Chayyim, steer we don't know. We have a steer in the Mishnah Berurah. That's the problem. The Mishnah Berurah in Simulation on Zion, the end of Sif Cotton Mem Gimel brings the Chayyim that says that in Kaifa Kli Rechava, Oisha Noisin Oleh Daf Rechav Umechase Bibgodim Amayla Mutter Avshem Amidei Ad Chetzio Bechayil. So he quotes the Chaya Adam. This is Reish Nun Zion Soif Sif Cotton Mem Gimel. It's good to see inside.
That's put up, please. Put that up. It's on page Yud Ches. Page 18 of the master. There it is, line 5 in the Mishnah Berurah. You're right there. No. You had it. You had it. Beautiful. Freeze that.
Reish Nun Zion. No, he's in the wrong simon. Reish Nun Zion Sif Cotton Mem Gimel.
You had it before.
No, a few pages further.
Reish Nun Zion. There you go.
Sif Cotton
Freeze
Mem
that.
Gimel.
Freeze that. Line 5. Right. In Kaifa Kli. Line 6. Next line. In Kaifa Kli Rechava.
Yeah. So here he's quoting the Chaya Adam that if it's more than Chetzei B'chayil, then it's a problem. So you have Mishnah Berurah quoting Chaya Adam that a little bit more than Miktsas, a little bit more than Chatzi, is considered Kulai.
Could it be possible that Atmana in Chayil is worse than Atmana with Begadim afterwards?
Well, maybe, but why should we say that? The Chayil, we never saw such a chilik. So the Chaya Adam is telling us, we'll get to it maybe, but Akapan, the Chaya Adam is telling us, Mishnah Berurah is asking like the Chaya Adam that Kozman is more than Miktsas, more than Chetzi, is already considered Rubai, which there has Nikakulai. So the Chaya Adam was Machmeh like the Benatam. We have the Mishnah Berurah being Machmeh like the Benatam. Okay, that's one Mishnah Berurah, no problem. You can go with the Chaya Adam. The problem is we have 2 Mishnah Berurah saying Lahadi Faket. The Mishnah Berurah in Simulation on Gimel, Sif Cotton Samach Tes, says V'm Einoi Tomun Heite B'Seicham Shu Pesuach Mel Mailo Shari. As long as it's open on top, it's mutter. What do you mean? It's mutman berubai. The zeller mikri HATMANA, because he brings the Ramah. So he learns the Ramah literal that you need rubai mamish.
Ramah makes no chilik.
Right. And so too in Reish Nun Chesef Cotton Beis, Zakta Kasra Achenim, and he goes al Arichas, and he says that the only issa is only kulai. If it's not kulai, it's mutter. So does he pass like the Chayyim? It doesn't pass like the Chayyim. The Chavetz Chaim could not bring 2. We have a steer in the Chavetz Chaim.
2 Chayyadams.
No. 2 days.
Yeah.
So what's the answer to this question? You can't have a steer in the Mishnah Berurah. There are some people that when they have a steer in Mishnah Berurah, they say that the Mishnah Berurah's son, as we know, wrote some of it. You know that? Chavetz Chaim's son wrote some of the Mishnah Berurah. So therefore, some was written by his son, and some was written by the Heilige Chavetz Chaim. Chazanish said that's apicursus to say. He says Mishnah Berurah took a chrayas on it. That means he went through. Even let's say his son wrote it, He took the achrayus and whatever his son Paskin is right. So you can tell me he's soisim in a bay? Can't be. So how do we answer the steer? And this steer is very negated to us, our crackpots. How do you answer this? He tells me, good, so let's say we have two machlekes. We have one machlekes mechaber in the Ramah, if HATMANA b'miktzas is a problem. Fine. The Ramah says it's not, let's say, the mechaber says it is. Now we have machlekes, what's called HATMANA b'miktzas, and what's called HATMANA b'kulay. We have one Chaya Adam, let's go with the Mishabur, one Mishabur that tells us that as long as it's more than Chatzi, it's called Kulay, so we have to be machmer on that also, B'nai Ashkenaz, and one Mishabur that tells us till it's Kulay completely, it's not called Kulay. So I'll tell you, I have three truths into this kasha, to this theory. One is, Rabbi Yankov Kamenetsky brought down in Emes Liyaakov Simon Shin Mem Siv Vav. This is the Yisrael Rabbi Yankov Kamenetsky. It's kedai to know for your lifetime. You live till 120, goes into young. He says, and Rabbi Chaim Perashami went with the same Yisrael, I heard it from his Talmidim, that when the Mishabura brings a name in the Mishabura, he's not passing like that Manda Amma. He's just, most of the times, if you learn Mishabura, I'm sure we're all Ragal over here, Anshe Talmid HaChamim, we're all Ragal to learn Mishaburas. Most of the time, in the Shayatzin, he gets where he got it from. Why sometimes on the top, in the Mishabur itself, he writes the name? What's in the gate? Right? What's the Shayatzin? Shayatzin means the Tzion, where I got it from. So all the time, he's writing in Shayatzin where he got it from. Magen Avram, Tas, Bim Megadim, Eli Rabba, Shechanach, whoever you want, that's where it's written. Why sometimes would he write the name in the Mishabur itself?
Like a word, the Chayadim, like it calls Chayadim in the brackets.
Zot Rabbi Yankov Kamenetsky and Rabbi Chaim Perashami make the same. That when he's writing the name, it means I don't hold like that, but that's what this person said. It's enough for me to be chayshish for it, but it's not dafka that I hold like that. When he doesn't write the name, that means that's I'm achrayus on this thing. You want to look at Shatzin, it might be too small. The letters might be too small by this age already by now. You see it, you don't see it. That's what I hold like. When I'm writing it in the name in the Mishabur itself, then it means that that's a name, that's a shita, but that's his shita. I'm quoting it because I might hold like that, l'chomer for sure, but that doesn't mean that I really, that's my halacha l'maisa. You hear this? Worth $1 million, this shtickle now, right? Lav dafki had been a tam. And if you listen to Rabbi Weiss Shir, you have to know if this has been a tam, a yuchas or not. So yeah, you have to know they didn't have every rishon. Today was spoiled. A lot of times in the Be'alacha itself, he writes achakach matzasi v'ritva, like you would think. Ritva, that's every shul in Lakewood, every shtibel in Borough Park has a ritva, right? They just didn't have it. What?
No, he has another. He has even another pshat in the right time, which is not for now. But
yeah, okay, fine.
He changes the pshat in the
I'll
right
tell you
time.
a good deal.
Yeah.
Because why do you say rubai or kulai? Let it say
Right.
kulai or rubai.
Yeah.
You didn't say the less chiddush first.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
He said it goes in the kisui, not on the whole thing.
Yeah. So Bekitza, but Akabanim in the Chai Adam you can't say that. So over there you're stuck. So this is a yisayv to answer the Stir Mishabura. You hear? Rabbi Kalbach. They should wake up the dead people. No? We said a new thing for the Yankov Kamenetsky and Chaim Perashimberg. That when you have a Stir Mishabura, always look out to see, and I have this many times, that they have a steer, and this Rabbi Kamenetsky is brought in Emes Liyaakov, I told you.
Where?
Simon Shin Mem Sivav.
Shin Mem Vav.
Emes Liyaakov. It's not over here. It's not. He didn't ask the steer here, but this is Rabbi Kamenetsky. So this is one way to answer the Mishabura. This is a very Jakava way to answer it. It's like a cheap way out. But the Maisa, it's a pretty You ask him. Oh, you mean if he has Messiah in it, did he speak to the Chavetz Chaim about this? Yeah, okay. But Yankov Kamenetsky normally had very reliable.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense also in Tzvar. Like, why did he sometimes choose to say the name? Why not? It was Mr. Mungegang, and he had space on the Shahatzin to write, and that's what Shahatzin is called, Shahatzin, to be Mitzayin where the Ma'amokim is. Sometimes he's a little more Ma'ach in Shahatzin, but that's really basically it's ayin. That's all it is. So the fact that he wrote it, Muzayin, that he's giving it samchas to that sefer, and not that because that will be easier for us to say. Now there's a yid, Rabbi Reuben. He's You probably don't know his name, but you know his sefer. Many know his sefer. He has for the most chashuv the Heintig Svarim today on Shabbos, which is called Eicha Shabbos. Two Mechabim wrote it together. So he has a sefer called Eicha Shabbos. Now it's already 3-4 volumes, and very chashuv sefer. It's like it's after Shmir Shabbos. It's more now. It's more arichas than that. But akapanim. So he wrote not in a sefer, in a sefer Eicha Shabbos. He's bothered with the steer Mishabura. And he says there's a big nafkamina. If you're being matman and davar ha'moisef hevel, then the Mishabura is machmer. Even if you don't have a tamana bekula, he calls man it's rubai. It's enough to be machmer. Masha'en came. If it's maimed hevel, then you need kulay dafka.
Where did you get this far?
Rabbi Neuvert, as we know, that's the Baal Shmir Shabbos K'chasa. In that sefer Eitzah Shabbos, he goes to town on him. He mamish knocks him out. He says you can't say such a thing, and it was all negay crackpots. I'm giving you all agdama for crackpots, but akapanim, there was the first shmuz of crackpots was brought down in this sefer called Eitzah Shabbos. It's Amid Tavkuf Yudalit over there, and that's where this Shakavataya went back and forth. And Rav Neuvert, who was a very bar samcha, big bar samcha in Klal Yisrael in the Shabbos.
No, Shabbos itself, even ain't a Ma'aseh.
Right.
Shabbos, yeah.
So he's telling you, let's say if it's talking about a case of Ma'aseh Hevel on Erev Shabbos, crackpat, then even if it's not Mutman Bekula, then Ruba is enough to be Machmer, even Ben Ashkenaz.
It is Ma'aseh Hevel. It's Ma'aseh Hevel.
Crackpat's Ma'aseh Hevel.
Ma'aseh Hevel.
Yeah, he's telling you on Erev Shabbos the case. No, the nafkamina would be, let's say on Shabbos, you put it on Maimon Hevel, you're matman with Maimon Hevel, but it was only Rav, it's not going to be Asal Ibn Ashkenaz. Masha'in came, if it was Erev Shabbos, Davar Moisef Hevel, Maimon B'Rav, that would be, Davar Moisef Hevel B'Rav will be enough. That's his test, I'm telling you, Rabbi Neuvert goes to town with that, and the Chutshani in Simcha of Ches, Amid Kufla Tes, he has another test to the steer. So Bekitza, I have another test this year. We're not going to go into this because we're not going to get to where we have to get to. So Akapanim, this steer Mishabura, if Ruba is enough to be Machmet, Ibn Ashkenaz, and many truths. Now let's talk one more topic quickly before we discuss the crackpot itself. We know the HaRav in Simulation on Zion, the end of Sif Yud, he discusses that we're talking about that Kol's man. There's going to be a little bit of aver in between. That's not going to be considered HATMANA. That's why people think that if you put a pot in the oven, so that's HATMANA. You don't know the first thing of HATMANA. HATMANA means that it's surrounding the pot. Not that the pot is it's something that a pot is in. It has to be literally surrounding the pot. And that's why there's a big shmuz in the Paiskim, which the Maisa were machma, but let's say you put a towel over a few pots. So the towel is not really covering each pot by itself. It's just going over a few pots. So therefore, Kol's man, it's not touching every pot. You would think maybe it's not HATMANA, because HATMANA means it's surrounding the pot itself. The Maisa, we say that Kol's man, the pots are touching each other and the towels over all the pots, that's called HATMANA. But there can't be space in between. Now, space in between, you have to understand how much space is called that there's space in between. And that's what we're going to discuss when we get to crackpots. So now, let's start now with crackpots. So we understand that I like to call it a crack, a pot and a crack. Some of that's where we got the name from, right? So it's a pot and a crack, right? The crack is the bottom and the pot is in it. It's two things, right? Now, I'm not talking about, many people today have the flat ones. There's no HATMANA, there's nothing. Why is there no HATMANA? It's only on the bottom. Like the Svardim, that's HATMANA b'miktzas, no?
Just the bottom.
Yeah.
Just the bottom is HATMANA?
Why not?
Like
HATMANA b'miktzas.
So what about every blech should be HATMANA?
Yeah, every blech should be HATMANA. You know, held like that? The Chazanish. If you makba on the mechaber, then every blech is HATMANA. Anything. Well,
and he didn't hold the blechs either.
It's absurd. It's like, what are you supposed to do? You hear every blech?
If you're a Sephardi.
Tripod?
If you're a Sephardi.
Sephardi. And the Chazon Ish was machma on the Sephardim, mechaber.
Right.
And so too does Nidbru. And so the Stipler. That's why I told you they had a whole patent that it was like over the fire. We still never saw a picture of it, but that's what, whatever. It wasn't just So what are you saying? A tripod? What's a tripod?
Holds it up very high, like an old thing. That they Batsheva's.
Batsheva's thing is a tripod?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. Rabbits and Batsheva. Okay, fine. But Akapanim, so that's now, okay, I don't want to get into that because we're not Tzvadim, but I wanted to be nice a little bit more. Even our crack, the flat ones, it goes up a little bit. The mashu? The rim. So if you're going to tell me that, right? Rabbi Shlomo, you know what I'm talking about?
No.
You don't have a crackpot? Is the old school used to put out?
I do, but I never look. I just eat it. What? Where's the rim? What are you talking about?
Even the flat ones,
yeah,
which you probably have. Do you have a flat one?
Yeah.
The diet. That wasn't a flat one. That's the Shlomo Zalman's one, which we're going to discuss. The flat ones have a little bit rim, else the pot is going to fall off. Right. It just holds the pot where it is. Thanks to the Number one, right? No, okay.
There's probably no element in the rim. It's just a little nothing.
Oh, so Rabbi Black is saying there's no heat in the rim. It's just there to hold it. Tell me you're right. Okay, fine. So we're not making any problems with that, please. That's not HATMANA, no problem. Shia Chazar maybe, but not HATMANA. So we're discussing the insert of the pots that the insert of the crack pot that you're putting in the crack pot. Now, the pot itself. So let's, before we get to Shlomo Zalman, let's see what the Poskim spoke about it. The Sefer called Hilchos Shabbos b'Shabbos, he writes that there's a Pashut Tzad Kula. He says, the Loimiki HATMANA el b'dava metaltel shemadbik eitzel doifnei HaTana. Avol Tana sasem lav HATMANI. Tana itself is not called HATMANA. And he says more. He says there's space in between the pot and the heating element. That means we can't see what's going on underneath there, in between, because it's colored, right? But if you would take out the pot and you would take a measurement, there is some space in between the heating element and the pot.
Otherwise, you couldn't get it in.
No, you'll be able to get it in.
What do you mean? Aren't you talking about picking it up and putting it back? But how do you cook it? You have to fill it up before Shabbos, no?
No. It has a handle on top.
A handle on top.
There's a handle on top that doesn't let it fall in, right? So he's telling you, there's some space in between. Since there's some space in between, no problem. Right? Forget the whole thing. Whoever wanted to ask it never looked at it. Go look at it. Maybe we can have that picture that was here when I walked in. Was that the right? No, so it's kedai to see. That means that there is some space in between the heating element to the pot, the insert to the pot. So, matter we said, calls man this ave in between, right? So, I'm not sure if you see clearly. Where does the insert end? The dark black?
You see where the little black part is? That's space in between that and the rim of the. You can see the.
On the pot.
The insert is a double thing. The insert is the double one.
The insert is
the double one. So
right.
So that area after see the black on the side?
Right.
So in between the black and that next line is space.
There's space in between. Very good. So now that space in between should be l'chayra, a pashta ave in between HATMANA. So now, what's the tzadna to say not like this?
So that's a heter, that space in between?
That should be a heter. Zokim Shlomo Zalman.
Because it's not madbik.
Yeah. It's not touching. Zokim Shlomo Zalman. Umir ta'adu shebeneim. Nechshav ke'ena mutmanes. Kivon shekachi aderech levashel gambi ma'isachar. He says, this is not a heter. Since I cook like this with this space in between, it can't be that this average is going to be a matter. You hear what Shlomo Zalman saying? Shlomo Zalman knew about this problem. And Shlomo Zalman's telling you, this ave in between is not, what's the pshat in ave in between? What's the ave in between? So what? The pshat is that it's not keeping heat. Zakir Shlomo Zalman, if I cook like this is the greatest raya that this space is not considered enough of a space to be mastered from keeping heat. That is Shlomo Zalman's raya to say that space is not considered a space to be mayit b'choyim.
What's the link between derech b'shulai and HATMANA? Who says
It's
that?
not- He's just proving that if they let you cook like this, muzayin, that this aver can't be an aver to be matter in Atmana.
Why not for us? It's not HATMANA. Atmana requires mudbek kulai.
Hatman is there
What's
to
it?
make it heat, to be mice of heat. Hatman is there to give heat. What do you say,
It's
Rabbi?
not space. That's not, if you read the diagram, staring up, number 36 is not space. That is the inside, and the thing next to it is the pot. It's touching, they're touching. There's no space. That's not space.
No, this is a chlekes mitzias here. I don't want to go into chlekes mitzias. Let's postulate there is some space.
Yeah,
I
let's
don't
go
want to argue
to
about this
something.
picture because we're not sure about this picture. But we're postulating there
Yeah,
is space.
let's say there is space.
I'm
Okay,
asking
so
the
Mr.
lumdus.
Almond, that space
The
is
lumdus.
not going to be matter because that space I cooked there. So obviously that's the space that doesn't give it coolness. That's called space of touching.
But Atmana requires dibuk, has to touch it physically.
So how much is dibuk? Zotim Shlomo Zalman, dibuk is why does it have to be dibuk? Zeres not zeres. It's there because it's cooling off the heat. Zotim Shlomo Zalman, this is not considered cooling off the heat because that's cooking. And Pastor Kapel, we're going to get to you. Don't worry. We're just saying over Shlomo Zalman first. And so to Rabbi Yashiv says this is derech b'shulei b'kach, and there's no heter. Kommt Reb Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg and says, well, a little bit like Reb Shlomo is saying, well, give me it heter, this, that. L'maisa geret, darker b'kach not. But where do you see Chazal asked when there's space? L'maisa Chazal told us in Atmana, space is a matter, it's a matter. So now we have a dialogue between Shlomo Zalman, the two Gedolei HaPoskim of our past generation, of Shlomo Zalman and Yashiv say, this space is not considered a space to be makel. Comes to Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg and says,
Why
sticks
not?
up for us. Says,
Why
about
not?
it is, derech levashel, hakmish gechaynik. Ich red wegen Atmana. This is space, space is mutter. Finished. Now,
I don't see why they wouldn't come out.
yeah,
Show them they use crackpot, the open one. As a push-
they did. Shlomo Zalman said to do that.
That's what Shlomo Zalman said.
90% of the oil was buying today crackpots and buying around.
Right. Okay, we'll get there. One
Well,
second.
okay.
Yeah.
You're asking a good question. Where
Yeah,
do
one
we-
second. We're going to get there. 1 second. Yeah. What?
Puk Chazim Mamadevar Klai Yisrael voted to use the round ones. The
Yes?
question is why?
Is that true?
I would think so. Yes, you'll go in Klai Yisrael's houses.
Because why? What's the child? Why are people doing that? Because it cooks better. What?
No,
What
because
do you have
Megol
in the
Lamala. No.
Yeah, the flat one. No, let's take a pull. What's that do? You never saw your kitchen. in your
Echa
life.
Barama.
You go straight to the dining room.
Megul Lamala is
Oh,
mutter.
okay. Yeah, so 1 second. So now,
The small ones are round.
the small ones are all around. Yeah. Right. When it's only you and your wife, you have the round one. When people are coming, you don't
What I
want them to
say
see
on
anyway.
the Zoom, the hack here is what kind of
Right.
crack pots people are using. So it's not a lumdish hack.
Okay, so let's be nice now. Okay, so now Ramesh Matrikop says that I still don't agree with you. A little bit like Rabbi Black is saying. On top, it's definitely touching. So in the middle, you're going to find someplace that's not touching. On top, it's definitely touching. That's called touching. That's a svar. Fine. Okay, but now let's go to the svar that we have to discuss. It's regular Atmana b'miktas. Where did the Shlomo Zalman say not like this? How could this be? Atmana b'miktas were b'nei Ashkenaz. B'nei Ashkenaz holds Atmana b'miktas is mutter. Like the Ramah, you want to be machme, like the Mechaber, you have the Chazanish, fine. But Rav b'nei Ashkenaz machme is mekel. So why would Shlomo Zalman go connected this Atmana b'miktas? He didn't know about the Ramah. What's going on here? That's what the Shevet HaLevi says. Betach, the Vada Mishrayot Zalachme Yachme. You want to be machme, Aval Hayr Shaleil Shkem Atim, Zayn B'Yadenu. So look, Shevet HaLevi, Chayil Tes Simen Nun Tes. And he says again in Simen Nun Gimel Eis Aleph, man, the Mekel Kermov Shechanach, the grass, the Shechanach have the Imei Magen Avram, the Ksuya Shel Tai Oisa, the Ketay Oisa. You want to be machme, like the Mechaber, good. But Bechlal, we don't get the first base here, it's a Ramah. The Chatzkel Yot, and Emek Tshuva. Chelik Dalet sitting in Aleph Eis Beis.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay.
Hayel Lamayla Megula Emre Atmana. Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg and Eitzis HaShabbos, they asked him this also, in Yana Sefer. Tzarech Lias Mutter L'Ramah. So what are you going to do with this? How are you going to go connect to Ramah? What's going on? So, the Ramesh Matrikop brings that he asked Rabbi Yashiv. It wasn't just Rabbi Zalman, it was Rabbi Yashiv also. So what happened? We know that this was the last tshuva Reb Shlomo Zalman wrote in his life. And Shlomo Zalman was ganz gesund when he was nifta. He just went to the hospital for, I don't know when it was, I think Friday or something. And a few days later, he was nifta. And there were people that had a whole thing on this because it was like a bar. Reb Shlomo Zalman was a makel on a Shabbos. And he wrote this thing, and like no one understood it. There were so many kashas on what he wrote, and they were bringing it to the hospital. I think Mr. Kaplan was one of them, and he was good. They had a letter ready to bring it to the hospital, and plutzing Reb Shlomo Zalman was nifta. It was mamish a sudden thing. Again, he was in the hospital, but it wasn't. He was expected to go home. It wasn't like something that it was. You remember when he was nifta?
I remember it very clearly. Mrs. Nashika.
To fight with him about this.
They were upset. They wanted to clarify the.
They wanted to clarify what's going on. That's what makes us all these shilas that we're discussing today. They wanted to go right to some Zalman and fight it out with him, and he was very accessible to fight. He was very able yid. If you haven't met
More
him.
than that, they tined that he was either he was chayzer, or we could have gotten the chayzer.
Yeah.
He would have been chayzer.
Right, he would have been chayzer. Lamaisa, he wasn't. Lamaisa, at the end of the day, he wasn't chayzer because we didn't get there.
Yeah.
So the real chassidim, they hold that this was tzavot.
We're going to go over a few minutes overtime today, everybody says.
He couldn't. Well, 1 second. So now, so the shaila is so good. So we have to ask Rabbi Yashiv.
But what about the Ramah? Why did
we're
Zal mention the Ramah?
Yeah, so we're going to get to it. So Rabbi Yashiv said that. So again, Rabbi Yashiv was living many years Baruch Hashem afterwards. We were zeichet to have him, and I asked Rabbi Yashiv, "HATMANA b'miktzas, what do you do?" So Rabbi Yashiv said like this. He says, "Much more to cop writes, Hey Shabbat Gishal Yashiv, shebe'emes ro locha sheyesh bekach mishum HATMANA. You really have to be chayshish this HATMANA." And he quotes, he says that the time al pi megadim, the sphere the apolay kisim elamaylo kol shemechusa kulay b'tzadav asim. We said over quickly. The Megadim says that as long as it's kulay mechusa b'tzadav, it's asim. So Mamela, even though it's not HATMANA b'kulay, that's called HATMANA b'kulay. If it's completely covered on the side, that's called HATMANA b'kulay. Yeah, that's also right, which is a bomb. Like, what does that do HATMANA? Right, but not for HATMANA.
The question on the floor was, if some Zalman inserts also derech bishul lebekach.
Where is derech bishul? Right, some Zalman does write that. What does derech bishul have to do with any svar? So again, Samil is saying over what Yashiv said. So he said first of all the Pri Megadim. Then he says Atlachai Adam, and the Mishabur quotes it that holds Tzarch Kisa L'Mayla Harei Kan Ein Shum Chelik Ma'asim Megula B'Tzidai Ubezel Loi Tzarch Kisa L'Mayla. They're only discussing when the Mishabur said you need Kisa L'Mayla also, that's if there's an opening on the side. But over here, there's no opening on the side. Therefore, that itself is Asa. And that's where Yashiv went. Now, you have to know what type of svar this is, but that's where Yashiv went. Now, we're going to get back to this. One minute. The Machzal Yo, Rabbi Falk, was asked the Sha'ala, obviously, from Gedolei HaPaiskim. And he said, I don't understand the whole thing, B'chlal. This is not even HATMANA b'miktzas. If this is where you cook, this is no HATMANA b'chlal. Don't put this in the parish of HATMANA. Something where you cook, he brings a Taisis on the Mem Chesam and Al, the Matzal the Zaysim. Taisis says, Sheyeshin, the Gabe Gefes of Gemech Shem Yad Mekula, Abakir Shalonu, Lo Shayach Lameicha Shachi. By Akir, you're not Chayshish HATMANA. So this is where you cook. There's no parish of HATMANA, no Mekula, no HATMANA b'miktzas. The whole Tzaksa Taisis.
He uses the svar of derech bishul lahakal.
Lahakal, mamish fakir from Shlomo Zalman. And he had big plates, and that's why normally we think Machzal Yo was a machmer, Falk was a machmer, complete makel over here. Yishmir Shabbos, Kolchasa, he tries to go with another hatter, and he really says this. He says, Yesh the Mavur Be'rosh, he brings the Rosh and Perek Daltzim and Beis, the Mokim Shebishlu Sham Akdeir Kol Hayoyim, Loi Hoysel L'Shem HATMANA. If I put it there like a tchila for cooking, then it doesn't pass to be HATMANA. A little bit like a Falksvar, but different. He's quoting a Rosh that says, and Rabbi Yashiv goes to town that you didn't learn of the Rosh right. He goes on the Shmir Shabbos Kolchasa. Rabbi Yashiv, we don't have time to go into this, but Akapan Rabbi Yashiv goes and says you learned up the Rosh different, wrong. That's not the pshat in the Rosh. Now, so let's go back to Shlomo Zalman. So Shlomo Zalman says very clear that it's asa to go ahead and use this on Shabbos. HATMANA. What's the eitzah? The only eitzah is that you put you lift the pat and you put something in between. What do people do? They make silver foil balls or a tuna fish can. Now everyone knows, please don't put in a filled tuna fish can because it's going to pop and you have to chunk along with fish. You won't have any problems with HATMANA anymore.
So an empty tuna fish.
Empty tuna fish can that's open on one side.
And cleaned out.
And cleaned out, yeah. So that's, if you want to. What?
You said last time you have to do this post to Shabbos. You can't do this.
That was for sheer problems. Let's not get involved here. True. Because, okay, but fine. Kenny remembers.
He remembers the shear
He
perfectly.
knows the shear better than I said it. Okay. Givaldic. So Akapanim, so that was his eight. Now, the problem was like this. They went to Rabbi Yashiv, and again, Rabbi Yashiv said that it's awesome. But there's a Yid in the Sefer called Shabbos HaYoyim. He says Shabbos HaYoyim is the Nitra Dayan. Is it? Or his Sefer Shabbos? Shabbata. No, Shabbos HaYoyim is not the Nitra Dayan. Shabbos HaYoyim, it's sure they're going to put it out. 3 volumes on Milchus Shabbos. The Kitzur. So he says, in Simulation Gimel, he says he brought a pat to Rabbi Yashiv, crack pot, and Rabbi Yashiv said, I don't know what the problem was. It's HATMANA b'miktzas. So that's a little bit of a problem that this was written by Rabbi Yashiv, what we said, Rabbi Yashiv said it's awesome. And he goes and he says, I brought a pot to Rabbi Yashiv, this crack pot, and Rabbi Yashiv said it's HATMANA b'miktzas. So what's going on over here? So to answer this question, I would like to be nice of one akuda, that there are 2 different types of crackpots. Well, obviously that's the easiest way to say it, but the shah is which ones? I mean, let's just say whichever one we want and go take. No. So Rabbi Yashiv avad the held of HATMANA b'miktzas and HATMANA b'kulai, HATMANA b'miktzas later it's mutter. But Rabbi Yashiv was writing, there are some covers that go above the crack, the pat, and some don't. So Rabbi Yashiv held that if it's just a cover that just goes right on top of the pat, then it's HATMANA b'miktzas, because I'm only mutman b'miktzas, not b'kulai. But since there are some covers that go above it, so now, which means it extends over the side also, so therefore, why are they doing that? Because they want to keep it hotter. So since they want to keep it hotter, that cover is also going to be considered HATMANA b'kulai.
In other words, you take away Megul Lamala, that's the Torah?
Yeah. Now, this is a chiddush, but I want to go there. Rabbi Yashiv said it's awesome. Rav Vosner, Rav David Feinstein held that it's mutter, even though Rav David Feinstein was the machma last week, if you remember, with the pump pots, to say that's HATMANA, which was a massive chiddush. Like upon him, Rav David Feinstein held it's mutter, Stephen A. Bay, and the Maisa, most of the Gedalah Pesachim had a very hard time understanding this of Shem Zaman and Rabbi Yashiv. Rav Shem Zaman and Rabbi Yashiv did answer it. So like Rabbi Lowy says, I don't understand why just get a flat one and get your wife used to it, and you have no problems. If you don't get a flat one, you want to be from the Machmirim, and you want to go with the Shem Zaman and Rabbi Yashiv, you raise the pot, which is totally fine. No HATMANA b'chlal. And if you don't want, and you're
what about silver foil? Does silver foil help?
Silver foil itself does not help. We spoke about, because that conducts heat, that's not mamayit heat, that does not help. There's a lot more to talk about, but there's
we have another few minutes.
It's going to be a whole arichas. Because we didn't finish discussing last week's silver foil. So Mitzvah Hashem, Oit Chazon L'Mayid, and the Olam shall have 3 weeks is his man from Steiging. We spoke about last week, the Mashal. I'm sure you heard that plenty of times. The same 21 days you have between Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah Rabbah. You have between Shabbos and Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. It's a nachas to see everyone here live and everyone on Zoom, that I'm still halting mit, the longest man. From the hardest limudim, we started this man saying, the Chazanish said the hardest parak in Shas is parak Kirya. You know that? Chazanish said the hardest parak in Shas is parak Kirya, and we could truly say that we mastered it. We came out with new chidushim and Sayin Shia, Sayin Chazal, and Sayin HATMANA, and we're happy to see you, Mitcham, next man, or next week will be over Zoom, but next man live again on learning Yeshiva's Sukkah.